So now the fun part happens. Let's do the cables. So the cables are going to be tricky. Let's go over here and go cables. Cables, the first thing we want to do is import our text, not base. Let's go back to base text. Go up the node tree. We're going to want whatever is under, we're going to want this font node. So I'm going to put a null underneath this font node. I'm just going to call it font. And then from font here, we're going to grab it, hit accept, and bring it into our cables node. So this is text at the top. Awesome. So basically what we're going to have to do, I'm going to turn my background to dark right now because it's going to help. I'm going to transform our text and put it in between our lines, somewhere around there. Now, because we have this very still face, we can now use our cable tool. So let's use our cable tool, Labs Cable Generator. Now it might get scary. That this is okay. I'm going to actually allow editing of contents because we're going to have a hot mess on our hands if we don't. Well, before we dive into this, let's play with the radius so we can actually, visualize something and see what we can do in terms of making this look pretty. Try and push this as far as we can. So turning down the spacing to 0 seems to be giving us a really cool result here. I'm going to turn down the radius even more just so we can see what's going on. Resolution, probably want something small. We're going to also want to do pseudogravity or wire simulation, whatever works for you. So, but the one I'm going to do for myself here is actually going to be pseudogravity. So I'm going to turn the minimum to 0 and the maximum to 1. Gravity I'm going to try and lay off a little bit, but basically the idea here is we want some sinkage. I'm going to actually group this together a little bit more so it goes behind everything. So you're going to want to stack them as close as possible. Basically, you're creating something that kind of looks like this. Just for testing purposes, I'm going to go out to our base text because it's getting kind of hard to see what's going on. And I'm going to color this for now, like a bright red color, like red, just so I can separate in my mind what I'm working on versus the cables versus the Houdini text. So this is what it looks like currently, and I'm going to also add some sub-cabling. So this is going to add some more hyper detail into my cables. And once again, you have to play with your resolution to make it nice. I like my subdivision curves on. I'm just looking also that I don't have any pointy edges like this. Random scale. I like random scale just because it's going to provide more variation in what I'm doing. And I'm just going to go back up to my main cable settings, and now that I'm taking a look at everything, I'm like, maybe I don't need that resolution. This is looking pretty great. So I'm going to enable detangle, but when I do that, you're going to notice some crazy loops and curves and things happening here. And if that happens to you, you can keep trying to detangle, but it will get really, really heavy. If you like this look, you can also go with this look as well. It's got some very interesting shapes that I get applied to it. The more cables that you have, but as you can see, it almost looks like we've got some really torn or twisted wires that you'd see in a really messed up render farm. So I kind of like it, but also if it doesn't work, you don't have to do that. I also just, sometimes you might only want to put it on the sub cables instead of, you get to decide what you'd like to do. Basically, we're going to look for a nice shape in these wires, and then I'm going to come back and just, once I'm happy with the overall shape of my wires here, actually, let's go with this one, and now we'll move on. So I'm going to also make sure this is on subdivision curves, and I think we are good to go. Okay, so I'm finished adjusting my settings for my cable, and I'm just going to drop out a little null here and just say this out to cables. We're going to go inside this cable generator and we're going to have some fun with it because we need to kind of fix some settings before we move on to our next step. So there's some cool shading happening in here. I'm not even mad. That's really badass. So let's go over here. We have a couple different things that are happening. We have the pop sockets. I'm going to call them that. We also have sublines. And we have the main lines. Now I'm going to drag half of this all the way down here because right now we want to kind of pick and choose which one of these cables we want to kind of emanate a glow from and which cables we don't. You can pick any tape cables you want. It doesn't have to be the sub cables. I recommend you choose the large cables just because they're thicker. So I would go for like the really thick boys, not the thin boys. But we'll get started on that in a second. So let's dive right into here. I'm going to go up here where it says copy scale 2, because we can see up here what our cabling tool does. It creates these faces, and then it turns them into tubes. So we're going to basically select the faces that we want to kind of use later. And we're also going to have to basically create a group for the faces that we'd like to light up in the dark. So basically what you're going to do is you're just going to randomly select faces, as many as you like. We go delete, so we're going to get a blast node. I'm going to drag that blast node over here. So you can see the faces I selected. And then you can see over here, we've got some faces selected. So what I'm also going to do here is drop down and null. And these are going to be our out or out for neon. We'll say out for neon. We'll come back to this later. Now we're going to go over here and we're going to say group. And we're going to say, just go over here to our blast node, select the primitive selection that we made, and go and put it in the base group over here. We're going to say instead of group 5, this is going to be the neon glass. So whatever tubing has this group on it, it's not going to have whatever cabling texture we put on it. We're going to make sure that it's going to have glass. So this is going to be the neon glass cable. Now the other thing we need to do next is make sure this is working. So what I'll do over here is underneath sweep, color as, let's do something visible that we can see, orange or blue, pink or purple. We're going to do neon glass cable. So you can see, yes, it is working. We've got those ones in a group successfully, and you can already kind of preview which ones are going to light up. And at this point you can say, okay, maybe I've made a bad selection because like that might cause some problems later on. So revisit your blast selection over here. Go over here and say maybe disconnect that, maybe select that instead, hit enter. And what I'm going to do over here is go copy, since we're making changes to our selections, and do a paste relative references in the base group over here. So that should, any changes we make on this blast node should be reflected in this group selection. So now that that's done, the other thing we're going to do is a group expression. We're going to select the inverse of this. So the inverse is going to be, we're going to say this is the cables themselves, the rest of the cables. And we're going to go over up here and where's this group name? Go at group 000. So all the other ones are going to be up in this group. And we should be good to go now. So the other thing we need to say these cables here and the cables over here on the other sides need to have some sort of path attribute associated with them, so we know which tubes are going to have kind of the glass glowy structure on them and which ones are not. Because if we look at our reference here, you can see that there's some glass tubing and there's some black tubing. So let's create that path attribute. And what I'm going to do over here is put a null underneath my sweep node over here, and we're going to put a null here that says cables. I'm actually going to drop down an attribute crate here. We're going to say primitive string path, and we're going to do a neon glass cable. So now that's associated with that path. And then for this one, we'll do cables, and then this is cables. The null here and the path attribute. And because I'm me, I'm going to say where this copy to points is. I'm going to put this over here and we'll say these are the cable locks, little weird round things. So cable lock in case you want to. And then over here is the cable sub. So this one is going to be cables. Awesome. So now we're ready to move on to the next step. I'm going to put this into a group, so I'll put a little network box around it and shade it a different color, just so we know we're good. So the next thing we're going to do is do an object merge. We are also going to basically go into this object, go inside here to our cable generator, and go grab our out for neon. Now that we have those curves up here, we're going to convert this to a line. The curve does look pretty good, so when we're gonna have to put down a resample later on, but we may not have to do too much resampling. Now what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go back to our base text, and you remember up here where we did some poly magic? Well, we're just gonna do the same thing. So we're just gonna copy all of this, go to cables, and then drop this down here. So everything is the same thing as we did previously. So turn that off, and now look at that. We have some wires. Now, we may not want the wires to kind of pulse in the same way that we, have our text pulsating. So in this case, let's go over here and edit our magic. So we have magic selected. And now let's see if we can adjust it. So if you do time scale, maybe you want something, because it's more of a cable-like effect, maybe you want something that pulses a little bit more. Let's go over here. Let's go to color. Make those shorter as well. I might also actually, instead of just a navy blue, also put like a black in there. Completely make the value sync to black. And now let's go into our attribute VOP and edit this. Okay, so now you can see all of those are going down really, really fast. Probably too fast. We do this to 1. Let's expand our ramp. And now we have that nice kind of electricity pulse going through the wires. So if you want even more variations in terms of, like this is great and all, but maybe you want some of the wires to do different patterns. I'll show you how to do that next. So like maybe add more variation into that pulsing. So, but first things first, we're gonna want to, we're gonna do this as the neon cables. Now let's go back up here where we converted everything into lines. One of the things I might want to do here to streamline this, and let's say I want some groups to have kind of a different kind of pulsing effect than others, is that I can go over here and once again just add them into a different group. So what I'm going to do here is just go to my select tool, select some wires that maybe I want to pulse differently. Be careful about this sometimes. And then just do, and we'll call this second. So now they're in that second group. We're going to use a group expression to select the inverse. So this will be the first group. And everybody knows the math that's going to happen next, which is at group second. So now that we're done that, magic down here, first group, I'm going to go over here to copy this. So this is going to be magic second. And we're going to say this goes over the second group. And let's go down here to lines. So right now everything pretty much looking the same. I'm going to magic second. Start to make some edits. So maybe we want this one to be a little bit faster. Look at that layering. It looks so much more impactful when we have a lot more variations of that pulsing effect going through. We are ready to go on to the rendering phase and also bringing this into Solaris. So we're going to do a little network box here, and now we are good to go. Let's jump up and save.